Prince is his name, and I personally have used the Dyson Prince Worcestershire sauce all my life. I love it. His father, so interestingly, was a chemist, and the story goes, this is later proven to be just a brilliant marketing trick and wasn't true at all, but the story was that an Indian fellow walked into their chemist shop and wanted to create this Worcestershire sauce and gave them the recipe, and they made it for him, and it tasted awful, and they stuck it, in the basement, and then 6 months later they returned to it and tasted it, and it was delectable. So they worked on the recipe and finally figured it out. And this sauce was crazy popular. I mean, it sold around the world. And think of how brilliant it was. It was a sauce that required no refrigeration. It could last for years, and it made really bad food taste good. It was used on ships. It was used in wartime. I'm sure you've tasted it, right? You probably have a bottle in your refrigerator. Yeah. So this is no joke. This was an sauce empire. I mean, it generated, millions of pounds in sales over the years. And Dyson Perrins was the lucky man to inherit the fortune following his dad's death. But Dyson Perrins was not just, a businessman, running his father's sauce empire. He was also a great bibliophile, and really, thanks to him, many of the finest books in the British Library are a direct result of Dyson Perrins scouting them out, hunting them down, working with dealers, traveling, researching, learning, and then having the funds to buy the books and protect them. His special interests were the illuminated manuscripts. So imagine now, these are books printed before Gutenberg's press. So these were hand-written by scribes, old, ancient, illuminated manuscripts. In fact, one of the ones he bought, it's called the Apocalypse, was purchased for many millions of dollars by the Getty Museum and is here in Los Angeles today. A very popular book and rare book. I imagine surely it's considered one of the finest rare book specimens of the illuminated category at the Getty today. But Dyson Perrins also inherited his father's interest in the porcelain factory, the famous Worcester porcelain factory that was also in the community. And Dyson also worked very hard to protect the laborers in the porcelain factory, to keep the porcelain factory going. And here's where the story takes on, the fate of war and economics and politics was towards the end of his life. The Worcester factory during World War II fell on very hard times because in the war, no one was buying fine china. Everyone was pretty much in survival mode. So Dyson Perrins took it upon himself to keep the factory going by financing it himself, and was forced to sell his Gutenberg Bible to make funds to pay the workers to keep the factory open.
And I understand that as a result of World War II, this is what causes the Bible to end up in new hands again. And this next person, I think, is an oil tycoon who's implicated in the Teapot Dome scandal. Or the wife of this character?
That's right. There was a short previous owner to our Teapot Dome figure, and this was in 1947. A man by the name of Philip Beaumont Ferrer purchased the book in 1947 at auction, and Mr. Ferrer is a bit of a mystery, and from my research, he only had it a short time now, so he had it for 3 years, from 1947 to 1950, and he is our first owner who bought the book purely as a financial investment. This was his intention. He kept it very hush-hush. In fact, I wasn't really able to establish where he kept the book. He kept quite a vivid, remarkable correspondence during the period of his ownership of the Bible, but none of the letters mention that he bought the book. And even though he bought it at a public auction, the dealer, Ernest Maggs, promised to keep his identity secret. And all Ernest Maggs would say was that a well-known, not well-known, but a British collector, not well-known, had bought the Bible in 1947. So here's where we get into our Teapot Dome figures. So at the 1947 auction, where Philip Ferrer managed to buy the book through Ernest Maggs, there was an American tycoon amongst many others eager to buy our Gutenberg, number 45, and she was none other than Estelle Doheny. Many people in Los Angeles will know the name from Doheny Drive or the Doheny Library at the University of Southern California. The Doheny name is, the Doheny Eye Institute. It's really a well-known name in education and philanthropy here in Los Angeles. Estelle Doheny was the widow of oil tycoon Edward Doheny. And again, their story is quite remarkable as well. She had been born in Philadelphia in 1875. She married Edward Doheny on August 22, 1900. She, by 1911, wanted a Gutenberg Bible. Her husband, Edward Doheny, was an oil tycoon. Imagine this, Scott, now. For a brief period, Edward Doheny's wealth from oil exceeded that of John D. Rockefeller. So you can imagine the level of wealth we're dealing with here. I'm always asked, where did this come from? How was this oil money, so stupendous, so huge? And what happened was he managed to strike unbelievable, really unimaginable gushers in Mexico. His most famous well was called the Great Casiano, number 7. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, this one single well produced 270,000 barrels of oil a day.
Wow.
So overnight, he became one of the richest men in the world just from this one Mexican well. Then he went on to produce even others and build a whole sort of gas and oil distribution system in the U.S., which is quite complicated. But as Doheny's wealth matured, they bought houses, they built churches, they did all sorts of incredible. They had a yacht also, but Estelle Doheny became interested in collecting books. And when she read in 1911 that Los Angeles tycoon Henry Huntington had bought a Gutenberg Bible, and it made the entire front page of the Los Angeles Times, she turned to Edward and asked him, please, can we get a Gutenberg Bible? So from 1911 on, this became a great passion of Estelle Doheny's to buy her own Gutenberg Bible. And that brings us to the 1947 auction, where she sent her representative, a fantastic book dealer called the Doctor. His name was Rosenbach, and Dr. Rosenbach went on Estelle's behalf and sent his agents to the 1947 auction at Sotheby's in London in 1947, but they lost the book. The bidding became too fast, too high, and Estelle just wasn't willing to go over a certain price. Once that price had been beaten, she lost the book. And afterwards, in some of her letters and communications, which is so fun to read, the actual correspondence in her own words, she feels small and stupid for being so silly over a few $1,000s to have missed the chance to own her very own Gutenberg Bible.
And it wasn't even that much. It was in the 20,000s, wasn't it?
Yeah, roughly $50,000 she could have bought, U.S. dollars at the time. She could have owned her own Gutenberg, which is staggering because some people claim the Gutenberg Bible today is worth a 2-volume complete Bible would be worth $100 million. Well, here's where the story goes really neat and where my ears got big, my eyes got wide. The same book that she loses in 1947 comes back to her in 1950 when Ernest Maggs very discreetly writes her and tells her that Sir Philip Beaumont Ferrer is very interested in quietly, without any publicity of any kind, to sell her the very Gutenberg Bible that she had once lost. So she perks up, calls her bankers, and starts moving heaven and earth to quietly buy the very Bible she had lost in 1947. Sure enough, she pulls it all together, wires the funds, and within 30 days, the Gutenberg Bible arrives on her doorstep in 1950.
And she has it for a few decades after that, is that right?
That's right. Sadly, she dies in 1958, so she will only hold it for 8 years. And it's so
her
sad.
estate does, that's right.
Yeah, and by the time the Gutenberg Bible arrives, she is nearly blind. She cannot read the words on the pages. She can only feel the Bible. And she asks her wonderful secretary, Lucille Miller, her book secretary, she loved to be called, she asks her book secretary to help her touch the pages of the Bible, turn the pages, feel the leather binding. And what's so neat about this Bible, too, is, as I mentioned, it is in its original Mainz binding, contemporary with the printing of the book. Very, very rare. And it has like a sort of etched into the cover different symbols like diamonds and a fleur-de-lis kind of design. It's really quite staggering. And now that the Bible is digitized, you can zoom in and see the beauty and the care that the artisans produced in creating this binding for this rather remarkable book. So the interesting thing is, each of these owners, the third Earl of Gosford, Lord Amherst, and Dyson Prince all signed the first inside page of the Gutenberg Bible. So Estelle Doheny, the first woman to ever purchase a Gutenberg Bible, adds her signature to the book. And she has to ask Lucille Miller to hold her hand with a ballpoint pen, and she's nearly blind, can only see just vague shapes and colors, and she adds her name, her signature to the Great Gutenberg Bible with the date.
Oh, before I get to the next owner, I can't believe I forgot to ask this in the beginning. Now, I'm assuming that the Bible itself is in Latin. Is it Jerome's Latin Vulgate? Is that what Gutenberg's Bible is?
That's absolutely correct. It is the Vulgate, St. Jerome's, correct.
Again, like people just sort of smash all these historical events and think, oh, the second that Gutenberg prints the Bible, it's immediately in vernacular languages, and it's immediately in French and Italian and German. No, it's not.
Exactly. And again, it was printed in 2 volumes, and as I said, number 45 was just the first volume. So the second volume is missing. If anyone can find it out there, it'd be worth $50 million. I encourage everyone to hunt for it. But it is interesting. In this first volume, it's the Old Testament that goes from Genesis through Psalms. And of course, her Bible is not one of the vellum copies. It's a parchment copy. So it's on paper. And it's volume 1. Yeah, but it is definitely, that's so smart of you to know that. That is St. Jerome's Vulgate Bible translation, exactly.
And the next owner, I think, is this the last private owner who has...
She's the last private owner, that's right. And this is where the story takes really a sad turn. Estelle Doheny had donated the Bible to the Catholic Church, specifically to St. John's Seminary, which is in Camarillo, California, very close to, I know many of your listeners will know where the Reagan Library is. It's very close to that in an area north of Los Angeles, sort of in between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles, called Camarillo. And not only did she donate donate the Gutenberg Bible, but she donated her entire exquisite library of some 5,000 incredibly rare, incredibly valuable books to be housed in a library that she built. And Scott, not only did she build the library, she hired famous, talented, super architect Wallace Neff, really one of the great California architects, to design what I think is truly one of the most exquisite facilities I've ever seen. It's a standalone library, absolutely stunning, sort of in a Mediterranean style. A jewel. I would call it a jewel box. So this is where she intended her Gutenberg Bible to live for eternity, thinking that by leaving it with the Catholic Church, it would be protected as one of the